Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at an Amber Steel mirror match, but not what you would expect to see maybe. On my friend's side, he is using the meta version of Amber Steel's song, and I'm going to be using an Amber Steel Bodyguard deck, which you might think is a bit of a meme, but it actually has some staying power and is, in my opinion, quite decent. It is a character-focused deck. Around the 8-minute mark of this video, we'll probably go into the deck list, but I'm going to show you some gameplay against Amber Steel's song. In this matchup here, we are on the play. I will say, before this, my friend was on the play, and he absolutely wiped the floor with me, but he did get, like, Prince Naveen, Whole New World, into Whole New World, into Whole New World, and, like, I don't think any deck is beating that, to be fair. I didn't record that match, unfortunately. When I end up trying to record, I realized that I missed the recording. But I did record game 2, and I was fully expecting to get destroyed in this matchup here. But we get a good opening curve. What's interesting is, against other steel decks, this 1-drop Mickey Mouse, which again also represents a shift target for the Amber Legendary Mickey, is actually quite hard to deal with because of the resist 1. You've seen this card be used somewhat in aggro decks, like Steel, Amethyst, and whatnot, and it is quite decent. In this particular scenario, with the 1-drops of the Hook and the Mickey, as well as our low-cost removal like Fire the Cannons, we're able to really shut down the opponent's ability to aggro quest against us, especially when they're on the draw. We use the Fire the Cannons there in order to stop the potential Robin Hood shift. And the reason I'm aggressively dumping out my hand is because I know that I have this Musketeer's Tabard, which I can put down and start drawing cards from. My opponent here likely not on Benjas. I think they reveal that they're on a I'll flatten them. But if you want to sing a 4-cost song in order to out one Musketeer's Tabard when I play more in the deck, that's totally fine with me. And we do have other draw engines like Beast Tragic Hero and Rapunzel in the deck as well. So on 4, we're going to drop the Musketeer's Tabard. The opponent doesn't really have anything further to develop since we were putting a stop to their board here. And this Daisy Duck is just not in a position where it can quest because it will get traded out favorably into the Mickey and a Captain Hook. They are going to end up playing a Naveen and then taking out one of my hooks with the free strength there, and then Daisy will challenge a Hook in order to, I guess, just check me and say if you want to trade your Hook for the Daisy, they'll do that. We draw into the Shift Mickey, which unfortunately, we only have one Bodyguard on board, but we can still draw one because it counts for itself. But first, we're going to stop that Naveen from potentially singing anything else. Quest with the Mickey, and I meant to challenge the Hook here. Or challenge with the Hook, sorry, and I just said, yeah, I thought I did that for some reason, but I didn't, so I'm just pointing that out to my friend. I meant to challenge. Yeah, don't make like oversights like that, obviously, in serious play, but yeah, just make sure you're fully aware of what you're doing before you end up saying pass turn. So, yeah, we clear the board, and my opponent here is on a couple of cards, on 4. Okay, they ink the Queen, and they're going to eventually hard cast out the Robin Hood. So they did have the shift line, so firing the cannons, that was really important there. This Mickey shifts for 5, so we do draw an inkable here, which is great. And what's nice is, while this does seem underwhelming, like, yes, the Mickey will only draw me 1 card, with the Musketeer's Tabard on board, when the Mickey gets dealt with, when it gets banished, I will also draw a card off the Tabard. So we draw into a Tinkerbell here, which is actually really strong, because if we draw an Inkable next turn, which, our deck doesn't really play that many on Inkables, so we're likely going to be able to play out this Tinkerbell. Then we have this Mickey, which is a huge Bodyguard threat, and a Tinkerbell potentially dropping on the board, which is really strong. Us being on 2 cards and having this setup, the opponent, if they are on a Whole New World in hand, probably doesn't want to play it because they don't want to give us that fresh 7 either. So they just drop a Flute here, and they're really trying to decide what to do. They just end up passing. So we're going to go ahead and draw, and this Mickey is going to be putting in the work. We draw Rapunzel, and I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to ink it. But again, because I know my opponent is wanting to aggressively play Whole New World, and we have the Musketeer's Tabard up already, I don't need the Rapunzel draw engine, right? I can draw into a Beast Tragic Hero, I can draw into more Musketeer's Tabard, I can draw into more Mickeys. Like, there's so many other potential draw engines that you have in this deck that you can afford to kind of play a little bit more aggressive, knowing that you can refill your hand a little bit later on. And in a matchup like this against Amber Steel's song, you do have to match their tempo to a certain extent, and you can see us doing that here. Like, once we get to this state in the game, I think that it's just too hard for the opponent to kind of keep up. So we draw into more bodyguards, which again just represent free bodies on the field because Musketeer's Tabard will replace them. We quest for 4, and we are just putting the pressure on the opponent. They're not able to really execute anything with no cards in hand. Yeah, they just end up scooping there, I guess, just showing me that they don't really want to play the whole new world. The strength does nothing, and the daisy isn't really going to do much either. So I ink the strength for him there because obviously you'd ink before you hold new world, but he eventually sings the whole new world there, and then plays out a Zeus on the Tinkerbell, which is good, right? It removes it, hard casting, and then plays out 2 1-drops. And I think I was just explaining to him that yeah, I inked the strength for him there. So he didn't scoop. He just was revealing that he was forced to basically cast the whole new world. And again, with no cards in our hand, we will happily take that. We draw into Benjas, which will deal with that flute. So just completely oppressing the opponent's board. We're going to go to 19 next turn too. So I think the opponent kind of knows it's over. And yeah, I'm also opting to run Mufasa in this build, which you probably don't need to do. For a, air quotes, fun deck, this deck is kind of expensive though. Rapunzel's, Beast Tragic Heroes, Mufasa's, yeah, all very expensive cards. But it's a very fun deck, and once you get the engine rolling, as you can see here, it's pretty hard to stop. Because again, you have so many ways to draw cards and keep your hand healthy against like Ruby Amethyst decks and Emerald Amethyst decks. You can definitely do some work because they have very limited or no item removal in the case of Ruby Amethyst. So your Musketeer's Tabard are just free draw engines. The Emerald decks could play the 1-drop Clarabelle to out the item, but again, you have other draw engines to just keep your hand healthy and just keep dropping threats. And then again, you can just freely trade into everything, right? And protect your big questers if you wanted to play 1 or 2 big questers with all the bodyguards that you have on field. So yeah, we're just in really good shape here. The Kita challenges and gets us a free draw. The Benja comes in, takes out the flute, and then what are we going to do next? Drop the Prince. Oh man, resist 1 on that Prince there. A brawl target and everything, but go ahead and do that because I'll just draw off Musketeer Tabard, and if I have more than 1 Tabard in play, I'll draw more than 1 card, right? So we ink a Beast Tragic Hero because again, we don't need that draw engine. The opponent just on 2 1-drops can't really do anything because they can't out our board. Yeah, this Mickey being a 3/6 body just is really tough for Steel Song to deal with. So if you're in a steel heavy meta at your locals or something, this could be a deck that you could have a lot of fun with. Let's go ahead and get into the deck profile here. Oh, they're going to Zeus the Prince. Sure, I'll draw a card. Because they can't Zeus the Mickey, I guess. Or they could, but, they'd have the challenge into it as well. Yeah, it's just there's nothing really that they can do here. But yeah, let me know if you made it this far in the video, what you think of the deck so far. Let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. So for this deck profile, we opted to go with a character-heavy version, 48 characters and only 12 non-characters, hence why I opted to try to make Mufasa work in this deck. But again, you can opt not to play him. But you can see here on the pie graph breakdown, we are quite heavy on the steel cards in 49 and only 11 amber cards. But the 11 amber cards are very important. And I guess technically you can switch out Kita for Simba if you really wanted to make it, more amber. But yeah, the Rapunzel, the Mufasa, the Mickey, and the Chernobog are pretty important cards, all things considered, especially the Rapunzel for extra draw. But only 2 of the Mickey Mouse shift because you really do only want to play him on shift. I guess you could hard cast him too. He's still a bodyguard support 2 questing body. That's a 3/6. So still a pretty strong card overall. But when you do shift him, in addition to Musketeer's Tabard, in addition to the Beast Tragic Hero and Rapunzel, he's just another way that you can draw cards here. But the uninkable count is only 15. The inkable count is 45, so very easy deck to play. Again, just something that you can pick up and just jump into a game with. It's fairly straightforward on how to play this. Like I've already mentioned, character heavy focused. But on the cost curve here, we've got 4 Captain Hooks and 4 of the Mickey Mouse. Let me switch the view here for you guys. There we go. The Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender with resist +1 means that it's probably going to be a little difficult to out, which makes it a good early game quester. But then in the later parts of the game, maybe like turn 3, 4, 5, you can just kind of keep him readied or use him to strategically take out opposing threats in combination with other things. And he's a good way to preserve a body so that you can get the big shift off if you end up drawing into this Mickey, which is nice. We also play the, can't even read the subtitle there, Standard Bearer Mickey Mouse, which is basically like a small crab, right? It's a 2-cost, 1/3 inkable card that says when you play this character, you can choose another character and it gains Challenger +2. So again, a nice way, like on 1, if you go Hook, and then on 2 you drop this Mickey, that instantly outs Daisy Ducks, right? If you're facing up against that, which is really, really nice. Or bodyguards that might be protecting, like Lilos and Maleficence or whatever. So the deck is really good against aggro, just with some of its early game character lineup. Of course, you just saw Benja's in action in that matchup, taking out Flutes. Good to take out Dimes, and just Benja, just a good card overall. Comes down, takes out an item, you leave the game or leave that board state with a 3, costing 2/3 character that quests for 2, right? Super strong, same like it was when it was first released back in set 2. On the in addition to the 3-cost lineup here, we've got Hercules, True Hero, and the Prince. These are more bodyguards coming down on 3. In addition to your Kita being your first bodyguard on 2. Again, this could just be a Simba if you really wanted. But these being X3 bodies are good because they're potentially early game Rapunzel targets as well that can be healed up for 2. And the Prince having resist could be relevant into some matchups. Being the 1 strength does hurt, yes, because it gets Sisu'd, it gets brawled, but again, like if you have the Musketeers Tabard up, you're just going to draw cards anyways off of them, and they're wasting their turn to cast that Sisu, which is an underwhelming character, or casting Brawl, which doesn't really progress any kind of game state other than just stopping you from questing for 2. And yeah, this thing quests for 2, so it's still pretty good. And then into other steel matchups, this card is also very, very strong. The Hercules, you know, the reason why this card is seeing play is simply because it trades out Mim Fox. So if you had an option to play one of these two, it depends on the matchup, right? If you're up against purple, you play the Hercules. If you're up against steel, you probably play the Prince, unless you have the shift line for the Hercules, which we'll get into in just a bit. The Rapunzel, like I said, just more card draw, healing. It's a 1/5 body that quests for 2, so again, just putting more aggro pressure on board. The Mufasa, for the simple fact that you play so many characters, that why not play a Mufasa? It's just a sticky card that replaces itself, and you know, if you get a bodyguard off of the Mufasa, it can protect the rest of your board if your opponent's aiming to like deal with this first, for example. The Beast Tragic Hero, again, just another draw engine. When it's damaged, it represents a huge body that can help take out threats as well. Quest for 2. And again, just a 1-card draw engine. Demands an answer once it's played because, you know, between this, the Musketeers Tabard, if you have both up, you're just going to be drawing a ton of cards. The Chenpo as an additional bodyguard, once you start getting into this higher end curve here, if your opponent hasn't dealt with your board, you're likely just going to win the game unless they like B-prep wipe. But even if they B-prep, again, you have Musketeers Tabard most likely, and you'll be drawing a ton of cards off of everything banished. So they waste their tempo to wipe your board, and you just draw 3, 4, 5, 6 cards off of how many bodyguards are wiped off the board as well. What I will say is, you know, as I keep mentioning in my other videos, the things like the Emerald bounce cards, like Bruno, like You're Welcome, they do play around Musketeers Tabard drawing you cards because obviously your cards aren't going to get banished. Same with like Let It Goes and whatnot. But if they're using those cards on your cards, like you're probably okay with it to a certain extent because, you know, Your Welcome allows you to draw 2 anyways, for example. The Bruno can hurt, but again, if they're hard casting it or singing it, they're losing a lot of tempo to out a simple bodyguard most likely. That being said, again, the Chenpo at 2 and the Hercules at 2. So this is basically just being played as a 6/5, just a huge body that quests for 2. The resist 1 is nice, but again, this does get traded out into Maui. But you know, your opponent having to throw multiple things into this because it quests for 2, if you do drop this, is pretty strong. And I think I mentioned earlier the Hercules shift. I think I was testing out the 6/3 Hercules that shifts onto this one, but I ended up cutting in for the bodyguard one. I just think that, you know, this fits the theme better. For Tinkerbells, again, once you drop Tinkerbell and then you start protecting it with bodyguards, this is one of your huge threats that is just able to just absolutely destroy the board state, especially if you heal it with Rapunzel and just keep throwing this into everything. Your opponent is going to be hard checked into questing. And then 2 of the Mickey Mouse, again, you can look at it as kind of a meme, but this card, when it came down, is actually pretty decent. The support is actually good sometimes in making, let's say, like Hercules here a 6/3, this Prince a 4/3 with resist 1, you know, giving your bodyguards the ability to be pumped up. Because yeah, in that Amber Steel song match, I remember now, I quested with the Mickey, I boosted up the Kita to a 5/3, and then I threw the Kita into something to out it, and then I drew a card off of it off the Musketeers Tabard. So once you get the setup going, it can be pretty strong, right? This support, being able to give your bodyguards the extra strength, and then you draw once they're banished off of the tabard. And then one Chernobog, again, simply because with just like Mufasa, you play so many characters, you're likely going to be able to proc this when you do see the one copy of it. So the only other thing I would say, and I did consider it, is like running like Lilos as like one drops instead of Captain Hooks, because it can quest early and then you can start protecting it with bodyguards. But again, it's still targetable by Steel Songs. I think the Captain Hook is better because you do have enough aggro questing pressure between like the Benja, the Prince, the Rapunzel, the Mufasa, the Beast, the Hercules, Tinkerbell, Mickey Mouse, Chernobog, right? So you do have a lot of, higher questing characters that you're able to utilize in this deck, which is nice. For Fire the Cannons over the Babooms, just because, why not play the more efficient card despite it being uninkable? Again, if you are playing this deck and you're able to set up some of the draw engines, this card being an uninkable in your hand likely doesn't brick you, and you're able to just get the better efficiency out of a card like this, as you saw against that Amber Steel matchup. My friend was actually like, I can't believe you're playing Fire the Cannons over Babooms, and I'm like, yeah, well, I'm only on like 10 uninkables, so I might as well just put like 4 of this over the 4 Babooms and just get a little bit more of that efficiency. For Zeus, I keep talking about this every time I talk about steel and its removal. Probably the best steel removal, right, or is the best steel removal basically in the game. So I think anytime that you're playing steel, if you can max out on Zeus's, it is the most efficient way to remove things in steel. And then for Musketeer's Tabard, the card from set 1 that allows you to draw a card whenever a character with bodyguard is banished. Pretty strong ability, honestly, but the card is uninkable and it does cost 4, so you lose a lot in terms of setting this up if this is what you're playing on 4. But hopefully if you play this on 4, you already have 1 or 2 bodyguards on field that maybe you can even play this and then crash these bodyguards to out an opponent's threat and continue to refill your hand, right? And then if this card gets outed, hopefully you see another one or more of your draw engines. But if they end up putting this into your Inkwell, it's not necessarily bad either, right? With like the Cusco or the Hideaway in the set 5 meta. So yeah, it's a fun deck. Definitely performed better than I thought it would, but again, very limited testing. But yeah, let me know what you think if you made it this far in the video. Links to the deck list will be in the description. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Quantum is out.